those who have been the beneficiaries of this. The energy behind the Harris-Walz ticket is palpable. In just a short amount of time, support has been garnered from everyone, from the youth vote to Win with Black Women, Win with Black Men, also Republicans for Harris. So I wanted today spend time to talk about another segment, the youth, and with me to discuss the energy that is there, but what needs to happen going down the road is the DC Youth Coalition's director for the DNC, Mr. Tylik McMillan. Thank you for joining me on the Record today.
No, thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Absolutely. I want to just quote some numbers from Axios. July Axios actually poll, Generation Lab poll showed that a 7% bump from 53 to 60% among voters under 35 since Vice President Harris was moved up on the ticket and now leads. What do you think is the reason behind that?
I think there's a new energy of hope, of a new energy of freedom as the vice president has been campaigning on. And I think it's a sense of being a part of a historical moment where we see representing ourselves as we look at Vice President Harris as a Black woman, as an HBCU graduate, as someone who came from everyday America. And I think as she has been campaigning and giving this message, it shares a message of what is possible here in this country. For folks like me to dream one day to come from a small town, country town, of a one-stop light town to now being the national youth director for the Democratic National Committee. And so dreams are possible. And so when we can vision of these things, we can imagine to see the Barack Obamas and the Kamala Harrises to have that Black job and be the president of the United States.
And let's talk about your position within the DNC. What are you hearing on the ground from young people and what they want to see? There's one thing when you have enthusiasm and energy. There's another thing to actually get people to come out to the polls and to vote. What do you think is going to drive them to actually vote?
Yeah, definitely. And I think having someone who understands your values, your beliefs, and really understands what matters and what draws you. And I think the vice president has been doing an amazing job of drawing in young folks and staying keen and on a message of what the message is that young people believe in and what they are in the streets and what they are talking to their friends about and their families about. I think she understands that. And I think that is the important part. And not only the excitement behind the vice president, but the excitement behind Governor Walz and, what he stands for as a governor. With him, signing a historic, $2.3 billion education budget while being governor, him, protecting the freedoms of banning, as we talk about, as it was being banned of gender affirming care, he was the one to protect gender affirming care. He was the one to ensure that women had the full autonomy to their bodies in the state. He was the one to give, free lunches to kids regardless of their income. And so I think, we couldn't have thought of a perfect matching duo. And I can't even point out as, first, coming to this space as I'm a civil rights activist and advocate. And so working with the Floyd family, Governor Walz was the one to appoint Keith Ellison to convict and charge the ones for the murder of George Floyd. And so he is a proven leader. And so when we have two proven leaders who give us hope, who does not give us division, when we see their families, when we see the way that Doug loves on his wife, when we see the way that that the governor and his family, they bring joy in his family and his children, that is the type of hope that we need here in America. And I think Vice President Harris and Governor Walz is going to get the job done and bring that hope back.
You talked about just a moment ago that they care about the issues that are most relevant to that generation, to the Gen Z generation, what would you say are some of those top three issues that are important? And even in particular, I want to also ask you about Black men in particular.
Yeah, of course. So I think, as I've been having conversations with young folks and coalition building across, the country with different groups, I also have to point out, even being in this role, as I said, as a grassroots organizer, it's not important to only to engage with, college students or folks who are engaged on college campuses, but it's also a dual importance of engaging with young folks who are in community who may not necessarily, want to be, directly involved in the politics of things. And so I think we see a new generation of young people being involved who have an interest. And as I'm having conversations, we're hearing, the topics from climate change to protecting the environment. We're hearing about issues, of course, we're being allies and supporting women's rights and the fact of restoring Roe v. Wade as a staple of this country. We're talking about education, affordability, and student debt. We're talking about the fact of, the cost of living
Mm,
and the cost of rent and being able to survive in this, in this economy. And so we talk about all these different things. We talk about gun safety and,
mm,
and expanding, background checks. And so the importance of students and young people feeling safe on their college campuses, feeling safe in their schools, feeling safe in their communities, but also being able to provide the resources. We understand that in order to protect, we talk about community. It also talks about the investment in public education. It talks about the investment in mental health services. It talks about the investment yeah, as we talk about community policing and making our communities feel safe. And so those are some of the top issues. And I think our vice president, also Governor Walz, has had a proven record as we talk about even the vice president and the White House establishing the first office of gun violence prevention, and the fact of the Biden-Harris administration training more than 14,000 mental health professionals to work in our schools, providing that 24/7, 365, crisis service. And so I think, those things are important, and I think they don't go unnoticed. And we talk about the largest investment in climate with the infrastructure, with our Inflation Reduction Act. And so there is so much that young people are invested in. And I think, we have proven leaders on the ticket who have shown us their allyship in the fight.
Now you were just went down just a litany of the things that have been done, not just under this current administration, but also even with what Walz has done in his governorship position. For those who, and we still hear this conversation, I don't know what's going on. What has this person done for me? In your position, how are you reaching? How are you educating people in this? What has been the ground game for you? Because you've been in this fight for quite some time, a very young leader, but a very experienced leader with all the different organizations that you have been a part of. What does your ground game look like?
Yeah, my ground great game is, to not take anything for granted or to
Mhm.
take things that people just know it. I grew up in a school where civics was a part of my education. I was blessed to be a part of a family where my grandparents, pulled me out of bed and made me work polling locations
Mm.
to the school boards and county supervisor meetings. But there's an understanding that that saying, civics is not really a thing anymore these days. And so young folks don't really understand, the fact of three branches of government and how checks and balances work. They don't understand the powers of the vice president and what power she has, or they don't understand the power of the president and what he can do in his executive authority, or the fact that Congress, and we talk about the filibuster in the Senate. And so there's a lot of political education that needs to happen. And I
Yeah.
think going back to those basics is how I approach it, but also how we make it relatable to folks in their lived experiences and how it directly impacts them, I think is important. And meeting people where they are is important. And so, where before, as we talk about, where everyday media and the news sources may be the way that some of us may catch our news, this time around, TikToks and,
Yeah.
streaming and, the day parties and the brunches, maybe to how we're meeting young people these days. We're meeting people at the festivals. And so it changes our approach. But I think we should not take for granted that people are aware, and so it's our job to meet them where they are and educate them, even if it's the most basics of conversation. If it's just like, we got three branches of government.
Right. Just a couple of more questions. One, you said something that I want to tap into, and this is a message that I think we even need to really give even more to parents, because you talked about how your grandparents would wake you up and they would take you to the polling
Yep.
places and you would get involved until at a very young age. You had an understanding, not necessarily just coming from the school system, but also coming from your house. So you actually saw it in action. What is your
Right.
message to parents who are like, I want to talk to my youth. I want to have these conversations either with my older children. How can we participate as a community in this? What is the advice that you would give them?
Yeah, I would say, it all impacts us. A lot of times we hear conversations that, I don't want to be involved in politics. It's like, if you're not involved in politics, politics is going to be involved in you. And so it's like, we have to draw back to the basis of saying like, hey, in your community, we're upset that we're messing up our tires and we're getting flat tires. It's because of the fact that the infrastructure or our bridges, it's the fact of that investment. If we're complaining about the fact that our schools aren't being funded, or when we don't have the necessary books in our schools, because when we have to go to our school board, or we talk about, or our board of supervisors, or we say, we want X, Y, and Z. We have to, have that education of who is doing what, even from president and all the way down to the dog catcher, like
Mm,
what is impacting us and making it relatable as it relates to us. As we talk about our communities, and as we talk about, you know, uh, even like public safety, who's over that? It comes down in some counties, you got the election, your sheriffs and your chiefs. And so, and even some, and even in some states or commonwealths, as it is in Pennsylvania, and some judges are elected. And so, as we talk about those aspects, we have to bring it back home and as it relates, close to us.
are there any particular states that, when you talk about what you're doing on the ground, what the DNC is doing on the ground, that you're looking at specifically to increase your ground game, increase the message that you have?
Yeah, of course. I think, of course, those battleground states are always, the ones that we hit the ground running. But I also want to say that there must be, education across the board, because folks, know everybody. As I say, DC is small, but the world is small and everybody knows everybody. So it's important that we do the education where we are able to share the message to our peers across state lines to draw out the vote. As we're looking at those major cities, our Atlantas and our Houstons and our states and our Philadelphias, those big high, population states. And even amongst Black people, we got to be sure to be straight and honest. Like, Trump did not give you $1,200.
Come
It was a
on.
it was a global pandemic. Pandemic. It was not free money, and it was the Congress that gave it to you. We got to break it down that Kamala Harris is in fact a Black woman, and it doesn't matter if she's green,
Do we
yellow,
have to
or
keep telling
we
people
have
that
to
we're
have to
Black?
tell them, and your
The
vote does
explaining
matter.
is yeah.
It does matter. It does matter. And so, and we have to be able to correct the record, even as folks try to come for her record, but it comes down to just sharing factual information. And I think that's going to be important this election cycle. Political education, peer-to-peer influence is at the top of the line.
Lastly, how does it feel for you? I always like to get a little insight on my guest. I mean, I've
Yes.
seen the resume, what you've done, but to be a part of this moment, this movement, this energy, this historic moment, how is
Yeah.
it for you? What are you thinking? How are you feeling?
I say I'm just honored to be in the room. I'm honored to be in this space. I believe that God has blessed it for a time such as this. And I'm just going to try to play my part. I'll try to play my part. And I said, when I even apply for the job, to be in this job, I just want to say, like, what can I do? Whether it's big or
Mm,
small. And I think we all should ask ourselves, what can we do? Because as John Lewis said to me, months before his passing, he said, "We're
mm,
counting on you." And also even Elijah Cummings, when he said, "When I am dancing with the angels, I'm depending on you to save our democracy." And so I echo
mm,
that same message to folks listening. We are depending on you to help save our democracy. And I say, when our children's children are reading back at this moment in history, the question is, you know, uh, what did you do? Or did you sit on the sidelines, or were you an active part in making history change? And what side of history did you stand on? Were you silent or were you active? As you know, I worked for Reverend Sharpton for a while as a national youth director at the National Action Network. And even as we are I'm I'm an organizer at heart. I'm a good troublemaker in the streets. And so he would often say, it's not about the folks that know it all, or it's about the folks that have all the energy, but it's our synergy that matters in this moment. Even as we are protesting, organizing in the streets, protest without purpose, like what is it? We have to move from demonstration to legislation. And if not, we just walking around in the streets. And so it's time to put that action behind it. And I'm excited for us to do that this November. And I'm hopeful in my generation. We are the biggest, we have the opportunity of over 8 million new 18 to 19-year-olds who are eligible to vote. And so we have a big opportunity to let our voices heard at the ballot and elect Kamala Harris and Governor Walz to be our next president and vice president of the United States.
Well, Tylik McMillan, DC Youth Coalition's director for the Democratic National Convention. I hope to see you. I'm sure I will see you there out and about at the upcoming convention. Thank you for coming on the record with AURN, and you are always welcome on our platform, sir.
Thank you. I'm thankful for the opportunity.